Three, two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview many authors from all over the world. I'm very excited about this next guest because, I do believe the system is rigged and it's rigged on purpose. And I think this next guest has some insight that I may not have. He may share my sentiment, he may not. It's going to be a fun conversation. And the reason why I like interviewing authors is because they take the courage that's inside of them, put it down on a piece of paper, and share that piece of paper with the world. And that might change the environment and the community around them. So, that's why if you're looking to write a book out there, check out dreamstarterspublishing.com. We can help you out with wherever you're at in the process. And if you have a book that's already done, you want to market it properly, check out bookmarketingcrm.com. Without further ado, let's get into this podcast. It's called, the book that we're referencing today is called Invisible Trillions: How Financial Secrecy is Imperiling Capitalism and Democracy and the Way to Renew Our Broken System. Without further ado, Raymond Baker is with us. Thanks so much for being here, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's sitting right behind me here, and it talked about how the wealthy think and how the poor think. And man, when I read it, I was thinking how the poor think. Maybe I got that from the school system. So, in my opinion, it all starts with education. And that's when I realized that, man, I needed to fix my mindset on money. That's when I realized the system is screwed up. So, tell me about your book. What made you want to sit down and write Invisible Trillions?
Well, I had written an earlier book called Capitalism's Achilles Heel. I had segued into the Brookings Institution, and I wanted to. I've had business experience all over the world. I wanted to talk about what I was seeing, which was the capitalist system operating very often outside the rule of law, beyond the rule of law. And this was causing massive harm to countries around the world. And indeed, if you think about it carefully, it causes harm in the United States as well. My second book, Invisible Trillions, is about the harm it's causing to us. And the harm is the secrecy system that I write about, the invisibility that I write about, drives money to the top at the expense of the poor and middle class.
Right.
We've had a radical separation in income and wealth between workers and executives and billionaires over the past 40 or 50 years, and it is affecting democracy itself. That's what drove me to write my second book, Invisible Trillions.
Nice. And so when did it start to break? In my opinion, it started to break right around the creation of the creature from Jekyll Island, Federal Reserve, 1912, 1913. Things started to go out of control. And then I think things got very bad when Nixon took us off the gold standard, ultimately giving so much power to politicians to just create money at any time, right? Let's just print and print and print. And let's be honest, it's not going to the causes that they promote. It goes into somebody's back pockets, or it goes into individuals who are on their team, in my opinion. So when did it start to break, in your opinion?
To me, the break point was in the 1960s. And I say that because the 15 years prior to that, that is from the end of World War II in 1945 up until 1960, was, in my judgment, the period of most responsible capitalism that we've ever seen. Labor and management got along well. Banks were funding recovery. When I graduated from Harvard Business School in 1960, the disparity in income between the executive ranks and the workers' ranks was 20 to 1. In 1960, that started changing fairly quickly. And it was financial secrecy that facilitated that change. Today, the disparity is closer to 400 to 1 between senior executives and the working class. So I've seen it go from 20 to 1 to about 400 to 1. And that very much is a result of the secrecy with which capitalism has figured out how it can operate and accumulate wealth and not have to distribute that wealth fairly.
Got it. And so, why is it that inequality in wealth or this wealth gap is so crucial? And the reason why I ask that is because I see people like Elon Musk, who is absolutely getting wealthier and wealthier as time goes on, and he's either number one, number two, or number three as of right now as the wealthiest person on the planet. And I look at him and I say, well, capitalism to me, the definition is wealth through servitude. It's the way I look at it. So the more he adds value to the marketplace, the more he should be compensated for it. So I do not look at him and say, man, why is he getting all the wealth? I say, keep going, Elon, keep building great things that change the world. And I need to produce more value for the marketplace for me to increase my wealth. So I don't see the wealth gap as anything other than I need to add as much value as an Elon Musk. Why is it so important for other people to understand this? And how do you look at that?
The average worker living paycheck to paycheck, driving a pickup truck to his place of employment, looks at the billionaires of the world who have chauffeur-driven limousines, vacation homes, living in enormous wealth, and feeling that something's wrong with the system, that I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and he's a billionaire. I don't resent his billions so much as I resent the way that it has been made. Every billionaire that I know of has played around with the room that has been created for tax evasion and secrecy jurisdictions and anonymous trust accounts and fake foundations in order to accumulate wealth that cannot be seen and cannot be taxed. The average guy that on January 6th attacked the Capitol, these were not the poor. These were middle-class people who know that there is an enormous disparity between my standard of living and their standard of living. It's that difference between 20 to 1 and 400 to 1 that has grown and, in my opinion, created an enormous amount of discontent in the middle class, an enormous amount of angst that I'm not benefiting in the same way that these guys are. And in fact, data shows that the working class is paying a higher percentage of its income than the wealthy are paying. The wealthy have so many ways of getting around paying taxes. If they're paying, say, 10% on their income, working class is paying more like 20 or 25%.
Yeah, I think that I think people who are angry as the middle class, they may look at politicians and see who comes into the political sphere as maybe just a common man or common woman, and then they become multimillionaires. Case in point, I believe Nancy Pelosi, if you pull up Nancy Pelosi's net worth, I think it's right around $290 million, somewhere in there. I think the average person looks at that and they say, that seems like there's corruption. How does this person who makes $180,000 per year throughout her whole life at the very max, $180,000 a year, worth $290 million? Something's off. And so there is something that's going on behind closed doors. I believe that pisses the middle class off. In my opinion, no. Do you think that in my opinion, I think the middle class knows the game is rigged, and it's rigged probably from the get-go, that maybe, and I think this is happening more so now than ever, the system of go to school, all right, take on an extreme amount of debt, take a job you don't like, and then pay your taxes is wrong for them. But people who maybe start a business, invest in assets, have their assets pay them money, therefore they can take advantage of the 9,000 page IRS code for taxes, and therefore play as if the game, play like the rich. These are the ones who are able to break free. Case in point, me. I'm able to see how the wealthy play. All right, they're playing a certain game when it comes to buying assets, getting into real estate, creating cash flow. I need to do that. The school system, the political sphere of, hey, let the government take care of you, that's the evil. So, do you think people are waking up to probably taking control of their financial destiny based off of being pissed off at seeing politicians say one thing, get in, become multimillionaires, and then just lie to your face?
I agree that much of the middle class has that sort of sentiment, and I don't disagree with the reality of that. I think it is correct. I think the middle class has lots of reasons to be angry. And it is that degree of angst that I think is at the core of the problems we're having in democracy. There's a fundamental difference in where I'm coming from and most other commentators are coming from. Most commentators believe that the troubles we're having within democracy stem from radically different views on immigration and gender and religion and sexual rights and so forth. To me, those are not that's not the fundamental reason that we've had such a separation between the social classes in America. To me, the fundamental reason is income and wealth disparity. The middle class knows it's getting left behind, and it doesn't altogether grasp how this is taking place. The rich have ways of shielding their money that are simply not available to the poor. That's why I wrote my book and entitled it Invisible Trillions. The rich can do this invisibly, and the middle class cannot. You've used the words rigged. Yeah, there is a certain amount of rigging that is available to the rich and not available to the poor. I sympathize with the degree of angst of disparity that exist in the middle class.
So when it comes to, let's just say, financial literacy, I think the school system teaches you poor mindset when it comes to financial literacy. And wealthy are going to private schools, they're being homeschooled, they're understanding money at a higher degree, and it just gives them an advantage in the marketplace. So when I look at these individuals coming out of the gate, one horse is way ahead of the pack. Now, there's probably a reason why the school system is teaching a certain level of financial literacy. Hey, get a job, pay your taxes. Probably goes back to Rockefeller, when Rockefeller created the education system. And it basically made it so he wanted a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers. And he said that out loud. So there's an automatic, right out of the gate, competition is not there. But let's just say these people now go to the voting booth and they vote for someone. I think they don't understand inflation. The poor do not understand that the moment that these politicians print more money, they automatically become more poor, right? So inflation, to me, is part of this invisible trillions, that the moment the Federal Reserve creates more money, whether it's to give to Ukraine, to give to Israel, to give to XYZ charity or organization potentially funded by George Soros, what happens then is the wealthy automatically overnight become wealthier because they have assets. They might even have a lot of stocks. And usually it goes right into those companies. Money goes out, goes into the people. People go right into rent or into companies that they support. And the wealthy automatically become wealthier overnight. So inflation, those who print more money are only hurting the middle class, in my opinion. Do you agree that inflation and not understanding it is probably one of the biggest causes to this?
Permit me to take what you've said up to 30,000 feet and talk about it, if
Please
you
do. Yeah.
will. Something utterly fundamental has happened in the democratic capitalist system over the past half century, 60 or 70 years. Democracy is operating in the way that it was originally laid out. That is to say, popular vote, rule of law, representative legislatures, protection of minority rights. Those fundamental tenets of democracy, while still aspirational, have not changed since the late 1700s. The fundamental tenets of capitalism are now radically altered. The original tenets were making profits, spreading wealth, generating public goods. But over the last 6 or 7 decades, capitalism has made a radical adjustment to those principles. And that adjustment is the right to operate in secrecy. Meaning that I don't have to pay my taxes. I don't have to account for the money that's moving across borders. I don't even have to identify that I own these businesses. I can do business anonymously and nobody knows it. Capitalism has gone through a radical change. And while the average person in the middle class doesn't know what I'm talking about, that, in fact, is what has happened. The basic tenets of capitalism have changed, and it is affecting the way that democracy is viewed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe you even want to classify it as crony capitalism. I think that's what's really happening. Is that right?
That's part of it. You've got enablers, lawyers, and accountants and bankers who facilitate all of this. There are literally trillions of dollars moving around the world that cannot be easily identified, cannot be taxed at all. And all of this accrues to the benefit of the wealthy. There isn't a single, there is, let me back up a minute. There is a financial secrecy system that has been created over the last 6 or 7 decades, comprising a number of elements, and it is responsible for moving these trillions of dollars. Capitalism has taken on the motivation to operate in secret over the last 5 or 6 or 7 decades. That was not there before. But secrecy has become as important as profitability within the capitalist system. And this is driving disparity between rich and poor more than anything else.
Just by hearing you say a few things, I think you live in Washington, D.C. Is that right? I just did a quick little research on you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't seem like you lean right or left. You're thinking about it when it comes to wealthy and poor. So am I right about that? It seems like you're not really leaning one way or the other. Are you?
I am in favor of much greater rights, much greater privileges, much greater transparency, particularly for the purpose of benefiting the low and middle classes. You can interpret that right or left, but
yeah.
I've been in 100 countries around the world. I have seen what economic disparity does to political stability, and I see that happening in the United States now. The disparity between poor and rich is having its impact on democracy itself. That's what drives me.
Yeah, and so the reason why I bring that up is because it doesn't seem like you are really pulling for one side or the other, which makes you not a big government guy. It sounds like, just by hearing you're a big fan of capitalism, especially in the first generation, you're an Adam Smith guy. Are you an Adam Smith guy?
I have read and written about Adam Smith in detail. the way that we're operating capitalism now has nothing to do with what Adam Smith laid out
Right.
in his book.
Right. So did you support his way of looking at the world?
Oh yeah,
Or
yeah.
yeah.
Adam Smith's first book, before he wrote Wealth of Nations, his first book was entitled Theory of Moral Sentiments,
Mm-hmm.
and he was laying out what he thought should be the moral underpinnings of society. And he took that view into his writing of Wealth of Nations. So you know, if you're going to understand Adam Smith, you got to understand his first book, Theory of Moral Sentiments. He was a very moral individual, and he laid out the idea of capitalism based on his idea of the morality that should exist within society as a whole.
Well said. Well said.
We
I'm
are
with you on that.
we are nowhere near that.
No, we're not. But what they proposed was a small government. And I think what you're saying here is when you travel to these countries, what I realize is that the more government gains control, gets bigger, gets involved in school, medical world, involved with a big corporation, it does create the disparity. In my opinion, bigger government is either a symptom or a result of a capitalism gone completely off its tracks. So do you agree that the bigger the government gets, the worse we are off?
Not necessarily. There, I would put a different nuance on it. To the extent that government becomes controlled by the wealthiest class, which is without a doubt happening within the United States at the
Yes.
present time,
Yeah.
then the government works for the benefit of the wealthiest class. This is not happening, for example, in the Scandinavian countries. In Scandinavia, government is bigger than it is in the United States, but it does a good job of spreading the benefits of development fairly across society. I've been many, many times to Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Finland and so forth, and I admire the social unity that exists in these countries. And I admire the degree to which the populations of these countries have a degree of cooperation between all classes that we've lost in the United States. Now, you can make the comment that yes, government is big in those Scandinavian countries, and it is. The United States government accounts for about 35% of gross domestic product. In the Scandinavian countries, the government expenditures account for about 50% of gross domestic product. Mm-hmm. So it is big government, but it is big government with a social determination to spread the benefits of development fairly across the societies.
Got it. I just have never heard anybody who's a capitalist say, man, I can't wait to go to Scandinavia to become free financially, right? So there's a trade-off, right? I'm thinking that America still is the place to go in the world, right? If you want to pursue freedom and growth and just have as much ability to an opportunity as possible. However, I still believe that immigrants coming to America have an advantage because they've seen such corruption that when they come here, they feel more free, even though I'm starting to see the same corruption here. Maybe it's always been there, but I think 2016 really woke me up to the fact that this world is really, or this America that I once knew is gone, and it's going into a direction that is not looking good. When it comes to individuals getting out of school and not having the work ethic, the American drive, the American ingenuity, it just doesn't seem like it's a place where people are growing up and taking pride in being here and building a life here. So I don't know, the culture has changed, and maybe that is a result of some of the puppeteers pulling the strings in the systems that they run. So do you think it's sliding because of puppeteers, because of certain corruption at the top. Is that how you look at it? Because that's the way I look at it.
I think there's a great deal of corruption at the top, and it stems from the millionaires and billionaires buying and paying for the laws that they want to enable them to operate in secrecy without having to pay taxes, with disguised corporations and anonymous trust accounts and that sort of thing. Let me be clear where I'm coming from. I have a master's in business administration from Harvard. I've been CEO of 7 companies in my career, all of which I either created or bought. I'm all for the democratic capitalist system. I'm all for the capitalist system. What I'm not for is the capitalist system operating in ways that hurt others, in ways that benefit the wealthy and hurt the poor and middle class. That's what I am opposed to. Let me give you a little story behind that, if I may.
Please.
My father grew up in a small town in northwest Louisiana. He was an entrepreneur. He finally moved into Shreveport, Louisiana, where I grew up. And he built a business and developed a reputation of being a person who was absolutely honest in his dealings. I never saw my father try to maximize his profits on a transaction. My father wanted to enter into a fair price, fair to him and fair to the other person. He had such a sterling reputation in the community that when he was in his 50s, he was asked to become president of the biggest bank in town. And it was because of his reputation as a man of honesty and fair play and so forth. You don't see that among very many executives these days. When was the last time you interviewed somebody that says, I'm not trying to maximize my profits, I'm trying to be fair in all of my dealings?
Well, there are a few clients I've worked with. They say you can't take advantage. You're not trying to, make all the money in one transaction. This is relationship building. So I've heard something similar, but never in those exact terms.
Okay. All right. That was my background as I was growing up. And so I go overseas and I spend a lot of time in the developing countries. And I see more corruption and more money laundering and more tax evasion, and at the same time, more poverty than anyone of my acquaintance. And I see that having come from a background that was entirely different. And that affected me and made me say, I got to say what I have to say about this stuff.
So it seems like, yeah, you are a small business owner through and through, and you support the entrepreneur mindset. In my opinion, one way to fix this, and I will get into your part 3 of your book, you talk about restoring integrity, and I love the phrase "character is destiny." So let's get into that. But my way of fixing pretty much everything, and this is my solution, is think like an entrepreneur. All right. When you see everything happen in the world out there, the one way to fix it is take control of your financial destiny as fast as possible, which means start a business, become an owner to some degree, invest in businesses. Therefore, you don't have to worry about that corporation either giving you a raise or going out of business or forcing you to do something to your body that you might not want to do. That's my belief. Think like an entrepreneur. So do you believe that if we had more entrepreneurs out there, we would be able to maybe fix this income distribution problem? And I think that one last piece to this is, individuals out there who maybe start to read more about money, understand it, will be able to see the politicians who are completely full of shit, right? They're able to, understand a person's intentions based off of their understanding of money. So that's my philosophy. What do you say about that?
The closer the entrepreneur is to the people that work for him or her, the more likely there will be a fair sharing of the benefits of the corporation, a fair sharing of the profits. It's when you reach a level that is completely removed from your employees that work for you, you're completely removed from them, that you begin to think, I deserved a salary of $20 million a year and stock bonuses of $50 million a year. I deserve that.
Yeah.
That's a little difficult to do when you're an entrepreneur, particularly if you keep yourself close to your employees. That's what I admire among entrepreneurs that I respect. I don't admire the ones who separate themselves from their employees and take every dime that they can out of the sweat of their workers.
Yeah, good way to look at it. Now, in your book, you talk about restoring integrity and character is destiny. Absolutely love that sentence there. So, how do we restore integrity, and what do you mean by character is destiny?
The way we restore integrity is to get rid of the secrecy system that enables corporations and individuals to operate without being taxed, without sharing their benefits and so forth. This is transparency and accountability. Give me transparency and accountability, and I'll give you a different kind of capitalist system. Transparency means you don't have the right to shelter your money away in a disguised corporation where nobody knows who owns it. You don't have that right. Transparency is you don't have the right to be a tax evader up one side and down the other. You have to operate in a way that is socially responsible. Accountability to me means something very simple. Sign your name to it. Sign your name to the fact that you're paying your taxes, your corporations are properly registered, the prices that you're charging are proper. Sign your name to it. With transparency and accountability, we can get rid of the financial secrecy system, and to me, that is a necessary step toward changing the way that capitalism is currently operating. Give me transparency and accountability, and we'll have a different system.
Okay, so I'm with you. Transparency and being able to see how people do certain transactions, that's beautiful. But what about outside of the United States? I mean, I know people who have property all over the world, right? This is almost impossible to track completely, right? Puerto Rico, for example, you go there, you'll be able to save a lot of money, right? You move from state to state, you could save a lot of money. You take on a lot of income and you buy real estate, and then you have real estate, you take on a lot of debt. Now all of a sudden you don't pay any in taxes. So whoever wrote that book those are just the rules. So once again, probably the billionaires paying the politicians to maybe change the laws or change the tax code. All of a sudden, it's almost as if there's a book out there. It's called the IRS tax code. As long as you play by those rules, that's it. Are you saying that maybe you got to just change the rules, or are you blaming the corporations for even taking advantage of the rules?
Yeah, you have to change the rules to an extent. But the main thing that has to change is to eliminate the linkage between the wealthiest segments of society and the legislatures that they buy and pay for. The rich have bought the laws that enable them to accumulate enormous amounts of wealth secretly in ways that you can't see. They've bought and paid for that. And as long as that that relationship of the wealthiest to the legislature, legislators exist. It's very simple. It's very difficult to change the reality. Let me go back and give you another example. The key feature of the financial secrecy system is disguised corporations, corporations where nobody knows who owns the business. Do you know which country has created more disguised corporations than any other? Us.
I would have to say, yeah, well, it sounds like from what I'm reading about Biden and his family, what they did. So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what they did, but the United States has created more disguised corporations than any other country by far. Delaware led the way.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And then every other state in America adopted Delaware's law of enabling corporations to be established without the owners being identified. So when we talk about, oh, you can have these anonymous accounts in Switzerland and Singapore and so forth, hey, more of that exists in the United States than in any other country. Now, give me a moment to give you an example of how easy it is to change that if we have the political will to do so. After 9/11, the U.S. Patriot Act was adopted. Patriot Act has a lot of things to criticize, but one of the things in it that I think is extremely good is its anti-money laundering section. In its anti-money laundering section, the Patriot Act took disguised banks off the table. For decades, there have been thousands of banks operating in the financial system around the world where nobody knew who owned the banks. It could be terrorists, it could be mafias, it could be criminals, or what have you. The Patriot Act took what we call shell banks off the table. The Patriot Act says no U.S. financial institution can receive money from a foreign shell bank. It goes on to say no other financial institution in the world can send money to the United States that it has received from a shell bank. And it makes it very clear that this includes wire transfers that might touch a correspondent banking account in New York for a split second before flitting off somewhere else. In other words, the United States financial system created a clear-cut prohibition against the use of shell banks. Guess what happened to shell banks? They disappeared just like that.
What did it change though? I'm with you. That sounds like it's a shady deal, but what did it change?
It got rid of shell banks. It got rid of a major element of the financial secrecy system. My point is we could do exactly the same thing with shell companies, disguised corporations, by passing that kind of law. They would disappear just like that. But we don't want to do that. We want to have those shell corporations so that billionaires and millionaires can hide their money and do transactions that you can't see. My point is that every element of transparency and accountability is a matter of political will. And I say that because a lot of economists and bankers will tell you, oh, this stuff is terribly difficult. You don't understand how complicated it is. No, the point is it's a matter of political will. Just like we took shell banks off the table instantly, we could do the same thing with shell companies instantly if we had the political will to do so. Am I making my point here?
I'm hearing it, man. I'm hearing it. And I'm thinking to myself, you're a capitalist in DC. How much are you hated? Do people just can't stand you around there because you're probably saying to people, you guys are corrupt. So my thought is, what is it like out there? being in
Uh,
DC as a
it,
capitalist?
I was a member of Young Presidents Organization and World Presidents Organization for years and got along well with all my buddies in that. I will admit that 30 years ago, I shifted into the think tank community, and I see less of them now than I used to. But no, I'm still on good terms because when I talk like this, everybody wants to pretend that they agree with me, even though they may have a dozen shell companies in the Cayman Islands. So,
Yeah, being in DC,
well,
right? I think there's all kinds of stats out there that show that most people, the wealthiest what zip code is in DC, but none of them have businesses in their name, right? There's something like that. It's pretty wild that DC is. I mean, that's you're in the swamp, you're surrounded by them, and so it's fascinating that you're preaching this message so loudly, and I commend you for that. It takes courage. But last question: character is destiny. What do you mean by that?
the character that you bring to what you are doing determines the destiny of the outcome. And let me go back to my father. My father was the most honest man, the most honest individual that I've ever known. And his destiny was to be very successful and achieve the highest reputation that you could have in your community. If character is destiny, then a lot of people are destined to be very, very criticized, very disrespected after they're gone. But character is destiny. The character that you bring to what you're doing is the destiny by which you will succeed or fail, and certainly be remembered. It's an old phrase. It goes back 3,000 years. But it was a phrase that John McCain used when he was writing a book about people of character. And he entitled that book "Character is Destiny." I believe that. I believe that character is destiny. A lot of people don't. A lot of people believe that you can be the most disreputable character in the world and benefit and profit from that, but you're not going to do very well in the history and in the lore that transcends you. Character is destiny.
I like that. I like that phrase. Not a big fan of McCain. I think there's a lot of people out there who profit off of wars. I think he was one of them. So when you talk about invisible trillions, there are many people making money the moment we start dropping bombs. So you always got to watch out for that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
It's what do they call it? The war machine or the industrial military complex, right? So I think that's real, and that pretty much runs a lot. So. And I have to say, Raymond Baker, it's been an honor to talk with you, sir. The book out there is called Invisible Trillions: How Financial Secrecy is Imperiling Capitalism and Democracy, and the Way to Renew Our Broken System. Raymond, is there a way to get in touch with you, a website, a social media channel that you recommend?
I've got a website.
RaymondWBaker.com, I believe, is right.
Yeah,
That is it.
RaymondWBaker.com. I'm also the founding president of an organization called Global Financial Integrity. And Global Financial Integrity has a very big website. So between my website and the organization that I created's website, there's lots of information out there about where we're coming from.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was a little nervous about this interview. I'm like, does he hate capitalism? Is he going against it? What's he saying? Seems like you're a major capitalist at heart. So maybe our solutions are a little bit different, but the end result is what we're both seeking. So, Raymond, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.